Deconstructing Introductions, the research question. This video is part 3 of the Deconstructing Introduction series, a series intended to train you in the art of crafting the 7 elements of an introduction for research writing. Even though research writing is a problem-solution genre, research writers must still answer a research question. That is, the analytical question that focuses the essay on an aspect of a particular object of study. In other words, the research question is the narrow question in the introduction that the thesis, reasons, and evidence seek to answer. The researcher writes to answer this orienting question about the object of study. The research question is open-ended, and it invites an argumentative answer. That is why a research question should not be framed in a way that expects a yes-no answer. How or why questions often function as effective research questions. The research question clarifies what you are researching, orients readers to know what to expect from your thesis, and defines the scope of your essay. For these reasons, it is vital to the effectiveness of your essay that you get the research question right. Writers may choose to frame the research question directly as a question in the form of an interrogative sentence or implicitly as a declarative sentence. Consider these 2 examples. Although scholars have often analyzed the Pilgrim's Progress as a product of its time, few have noted the subversive themes in Bunyan's allegory. How does John Bunyan critique prevailing notions of religion in the 17th century? Or, although scholars have often analyzed the Pilgrim's Progress as a product of its time, few have noted the subversive themes in Bunyan's allegory. One may rightly wonder what critiques Bunyan intends for the prevailing notions of religion in the 17th century. Both of these options are viable for research writing. Thus, choosing which approach to use should depend on your rhetorical situation. An interrogative tends to be much more visible and confronting. However, if your introduction or hook contains several other questions, you may wish to avoid stating your research question as a question to avoid confusion. Too many questions too soon can confuse the reader and distract from your primary research question. Writers should also avoid framing a research question in a way that expects a yes-no answer. How or why questions often function as effective research questions. For instance, this yes-no question wouldn't be very effective for research writing. Does Colson Whitehead use gender stereotypes in The Intuitionist? The answer requires little argument or engagement with external sources. However, this how question would. How does Colson Whitehead gender elevator inspecting in The Intuitionist? And how does this gendering critique transgender narratives? This how question invites an argumentative answer. It is open-ended, and it focuses in on a particular object of study, setting the research writer up to engage the scholarly conversation on issues of gender and the narrower conversations surrounding Whitehead's novel, The Intuitionist. One of your first tasks as a writer is to properly narrow your research question. Good writers recognize that broad debates over large categories or systems, like race or gender or Calvinism, will likely be beyond the scope of a single research essay. When narrowing your question, choose to focus on an aspect of your object of study. Perhaps you could focus on a particular theme, image, or motif in a book or article, a particular chapter, section, scene, or passage in a book, or even the style, framework, or line of reasoning in the book or article. For organizations like businesses, schools, or churches, you may choose to focus on structure or polity, data trends, or bylaws. When researching figures or scholars, perhaps you should focus on specific contributions, positions or viewpoints, or even specific events, experiences, or characteristics. The goal is to enable yourself to do significant research on a narrow topic, contributing in one specific area to the research on a broader topic. Even though your research may not feel as significant when you narrow it down to a smaller, more manageable aspect of your object of study, remember that it is significant, since it contributes to how others understand the larger object and the surrounding issues. A proper understanding of the object in general may very well depend on the strength and reliability of your research on a specific aspect of the object. As you begin reading sources, allow your reading to narrow and inform your research question. When posing an open-ended question, writers often pose a question that is too broad for the length and scope of their essay. So as you read, look for ways to refine and specify your question. Imagine you're working on an essay about Christianity and culture. So you start out with a research question like this: how should Christians relate to culture? As you were reading, you discovered that this question is too broad for a research essay because culture entails not only arts and communal practices, but also worldviews, politics, histories, and so much more. Also, you realize that asking what a Christian should and shouldn't do engages theological, ethical, and social concerns, not to mention the debate over who qualifies as Christian and what qualifies as culture. So narrow your question to, how should a Christian biblically relate to popular art? You realize that this is too broad when you discover thousands of resources on Christianity and the arts. You also realize that popular art has only limited the scope of your question a little, since many argue that everything is an art. Do you mean studio art, graphic design, film production, poetry, parkour? So you make other needed changes and decide to ask, how should American evangelicals biblically respond to the contemporary binge culture? This question offers a much more manageable goal for a research essay, since it specifies American evangelicals. It centers on a contemporary response, and it focuses the research on the cultural trend of binging movies and TV shows. This research question would require you to do research on binge culture, engaging different analyses of contemporary culture, as well as studies of this trend and any contributing factors or resulting effects. You would also do well to research theories of Christian cultural engagement, biblical approaches to leisure, and perspectives on Christianity and TV consumption. The research question is the orienting and clarifying question that your entire essay seeks to answer. That is why it is so important to think carefully about how you frame and narrow your research question. Thank you for watching this video on crafting a research question. To continue this series in sequence, look for the next video on the research problem or involved issue. Or if you have questions or would like help on one of the specific introductory elements, please feel free to skip ahead to the corresponding video. Thank you, and keep writing.